In a town forgotten by time, where trouble rides in with the wind and legends fade slower than scars, they chose the wrong person to provoke, and by the time they realized, it was already too late. She arrived just after dusk. If anyone had asked her where she came from, she wouldn't have had an answer that made sense to them. Some places you flee, others you crawl out of. She had done both. Her name was Alira Quince. Not the kind of name folks in these parts were used to. Not that it mattered. They didn't ask her name, only wrinkled their noses when she passed, eyes narrowing at the dark patches drying across her coat. The blood wasn't fresh anymore, but it hadn't faded either. It clung to her like the stench of fire after a house has burned, a smell that says, "This woman has seen death," and it wasn't a stranger to her. The first door she knocked on didn't open. The second cracked an inch before, being slammed shut. By the third, someone shouted through the wood, "Ain't no shelter for folks smelling like murder." And that, Alira figured, was about the truest thing anyone had said to her in weeks. The wind whipped through the desolate main street, pushing grit into her boots. The town didn't have a name she could see, just a leaning sign half swallowed by overgrown weeds. It didn't need one. The kind of place it was told you everything you needed to know. She stood on the edge of the street with nothing but a pack slung over one shoulder and a silent prayer she couldn't bring herself to voice. Her legs ached, her ribs felt cracked. Something deep inside her buzzed with the kind of alertness that didn't come from fear, but from memory. She had survived things. But survival always came at a cost. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once, then fell silent. She didn't flinch. Instead, she took a slow breath and moved toward the last house at the end of the road. It was set apart from the others, its windows glowing soft amber behind crooked curtains. The fence around it was missing more pickets than it had left, and an iron skillet hung by the porch like a forgotten bell. Alira didn't knock this time. She didn't have it in her. Her knees were seconds away from folding. She leaned against the doorframe, just to keep herself upright. Then the door opened. The woman on the other side didn't speak. She didn't gasp or draw back. She didn't reach for a weapon or step aside. She looked Alira over with eyes that had seen too much. Then she said, "Me too," and opened the door wide. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you." The door swung shut behind Alira Quince, sealing out the howl of the wind and the harsh creak of the porch. Inside, the house smelled of stale tea and ashes. A single lantern cast a circle of golden light against the rough-hewn walls, revealing a hearthstone blackened by countless fires. Marina Dahl stood by the fireplace, her back straight, but shoulders carrying decades of loss. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, soft, yet holding the promise of rain. She watched Alira with a measured calm. When she spoke, her voice was low, as if unused to breaking silence. "I'm Marina. You haven't been here long." Alira nodded, every muscle protesting. She lowered herself onto the wooden stool that creaked under her. "Wait." Marina moved to a small cabinet and withdrew a chipped enamel cup. She filled it from a battered kettle perched on the hearth's edge, then set the cup on the table before Alira. "Tea," she said. "No sugar." Alira wrapped her cold fingers around the cup's handle. The steaming liquid burned her throat in the best possible way. Marina draped a heavy woolen blanket across Alira's shoulders, the fabric warm and coarse against her skin. "Don't know what you've seen," Marina said, her stormy eyes fixed on Alira's face, "but I've seen enough blood to last 3 lifetimes. It follows you unless you decide to let it go." Alira's heart tightened. "I'm not afraid of the blood. Fear isn't the problem," Marina replied. "Regret is. It stings longer." They sat in silence, the only sound the murmuring flames and the distant whistle of wind through the cracked window panes. Finally, Alira broke. "Why help me?" Marina stirred the embers with a poker. Because once someone took me in when I smelled like the world's worst sin. And it changed me. Illyra let the words settle as the tea's warmth spread through her chest. She realized she had come here not just for shelter but for understanding. Marina rose and crossed the room to an old armoire. She opened it, revealing a stack of homespun dresses and a pair of sturdy boots. Wash off the blood and change. Tomorrow you'll need more than wounds slowing you. Illyra stood, her legs trembling, and moved to the basin of cold water Marina had drawn. She discarded her coat and let the basin's icy grip awaken her senses. The water turned pink as she cleaned her skin, scrubbing until the raw ache in her muscles screamed for mercy. When she emerged, Marina handed her the simple dress. The lavender scent of dried flowers clung to the fabric. Illyra dressed in silence, the blanket's weight replaced by the soft cotton of her new shirt. She returned to the hearth, where Marina watched her with an inscrutable expression. Marina retrieved a tattered map from her pocket and unfolded it on the table. The map's lines were faded, but Illyra traced the route to the station, a small fort 16 miles north. "I'll guide you partway," Marina said. "Then you're on your own. They'll know someone like you is coming. Best you're ready." Illyra studied the map, every contour promising both relief and danger. "Why trust me?" she asked. Marina's gaze was steady. "Because we both survived the same kind of hell. You ran from him. I ran from myself." The lantern flickered and shadows leapt across the walls, as if alive. Illyra felt a kinship with this woman, two wounded souls bound by blood and loss. She took a deep breath. "Thank you." Marina nodded, then poured 2 cups of tea, placing one before Illyra without a word. They sipped in silence, the night stretching thin around them. Outside, the wind threatened to tear the house apart, but within, they found fragile peace. Illyra reached across the table and covered Marina's hand with her own. "I'll find a way to repay you." Marina's eyes glistened. "Live." Daylight crept through the cracks, painting the room in pale gold. Illyra felt it in her bones. Tomorrow she would walk into a new life. But first, she would rest. As the fire dwindled to embers, 2 women sat side by side, one born of blood and fury, the other forged by grief and forgiveness, united by the belief that at the edge of oblivion, hope could still bloom. The pale morning bled across the sky, washing the battered edges of the town in silvers and grays. Illyra Quint stood at the edge of Marina Dahl's porch, the woolen blanket wrapped around her shoulders now draped like armor. Her boots, freshly oiled and a half size too tight, grounded her more than anything else had in months. The house behind her exhaled the smell of cooled tea and burnt ash. It had held her for a night, long enough to remember what stillness felt like. But peace didn't last, not for women like her. Especially not when someone had tasted her blood and wouldn't stop until they drank the rest. Marina stepped out beside her, her coat long and lined with old fur. She carried a rifle slung across her back, not casually, not threateningly, but like it belonged there, same as her shadow. She nodded north. "Trail breaks left after the ridge. There's a stream past the old mill. That's where I leave you." Illyra didn't ask why. She didn't ask anything. In the time since Marina opened her door, some questions had answered themselves. Others needed to stay unanswered if either of them hoped to keep their ghosts buried. The trail was narrow and cruel, cleaving through bramble and stone. Each step pounded dust into Illyra's already aching joints, but she moved forward with a purpose that couldn't be undone. She had stopped running. She was walking now towards something, not away. Marina walked with the rhythm of a woman who had once run this path in desperation. She pointed out silent markers, a splintered tree, limb that looked too clean to have broken by weather, a pair of rusted boot hooks nailed into a low post, a pale scarf snagged high in a tree where no breeze reached. "You know who did this?" Illyra asked, pausing at the scarf. Marina adjusted her grip on the rifle. "I know who lets it happen. And who profits when no one stops them? The weight of that hung between them until the woods grew too thick for speech. They reached the stream by midday. Its waters glided lazy and brown beneath a curtain of willows, the air damp with moss and leaf rot. Marina knelt and dipped her fingers into the current. Cooler than usual, she said. Storm might be coming. Alira crouched beside her, filled her canteen, and tried not to think about the things that moved beneath the surface. Not just here, everywhere. Marina stood. This is it. Alira rose too. Thank you for the road. And the silence. Keep west after the bend, Marina said. There's a line cabin a few miles ahead. Locked, but not if you know how to listen to the hinges. Alira managed a faint smile. Marina turned to leave but stopped short. What they did to you, the ones behind the blood you wear, they think they ended something. They didn't. You're still here. I won't always be, Alira said. Marina nodded as if that too was a kind of promise. Then she vanished into the trees. Alira crossed the stream alone. By nightfall, her legs screamed, and her breath hitched with each step. She found the lime cabin. Just as Marina promised, the hinges spoke to her when she leaned into the doorframe, guiding her to the right pressure point. The lock surrendered with a sigh, and she entered. The air inside was heavy with mold and time. A cot sagged against one wall. A rusted stove crouched in the corner like a scolded dog. She lit a lantern with trembling hands and shut the door behind her. She didn't cry. There was no space for tears. Instead, she stripped her boots, unbuckled the blade she kept strapped to her thigh, and checked it, clean, sharp, unsentimental. Alira curled onto the cot and let her body settle, pain clenching around her like a blanket stitched from scar tissue and memory. Then she heard it. A sound outside. Boots. Not just one pair. 2, 3. Men. Heavy-footed, not trying to be quiet. Alira slid off the cot and into a crouch. The lantern still burned. Too bright. She doused it. Shadows filled the cabin like water poured into a cup. She moved to the door and placed her palm against it. It pulsed faintly under her hand. Footsteps. Voices. One man laughed, loud and throaty. Another hushed him. Then came a familiar drawl. I told you she'd head west. Wasn't hard to follow the tracks. She's bleeding again. Dog easy to trail. Single quotes Tomas. Lir single quotes S gut twisted. Tomas. Bell. The one who had held her hair back while they carved information out of her. The one who brought hot soup while the others broke her fingers. The one who called it mercy when he told her to run. He wasn't here to finish the job. He was here to brag about it. The door creaked. A voice sneered. Well, would you look at that? She's not even smart enough to bar the damn door. Footsteps. Then a body lunged into the room. Alira struck low, sweeping the intruder's legs out from under him. He crashed to the floor, his rifle clattering beside him. She kicked it under the cot, rolled, and snatched her blade from the coat post. Another man stormed through the door. She ducked his wild swing and stabbed up. He screamed. Warm blood coated her knuckles. Tomas entered last. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He just smiled. I was hoping you still had some fight, and I was hoping you finally learned to shut up, Alira said. He swung. She blocked. His elbow caught her jaw. Stars burst behind her eyes. She staggered, tasted copper. Tomas lunged. She ducked, caught his leg, and twisted. He fell hard. She landed on him, knife poised. But he grabbed her wrist. They struggled, blood and sweat mingling, breath panting in each other's faces. Then he said the one thing he should not have said. You don't have it in you. Alira drove the knife home. He choked. She rolled off, panting, clutching her ribs. The cabin was still. The man she stabbed first had fled. The second was unconscious or dead. Tomas lay beside her, eyes wide and disbelieving. I did, she whispered. She staggered to the door. The moon had risen, lighting the trees in bone-white light. She didn't stop to bury anyone, didn't have it in her. And the dead had stolen enough mercy. Alira. Walked. Bleeding. Silent. Alive. The fort came 2 days later. A half-ruined outpost. Cradled by mountains, its towers half collapsed. Its sentries lazy-eyed and suspicious. She stepped through the gate. More shadow than woman. One guard stepped in front of her. "You look like hell." Alira met his gaze. "I've been there." Didn't stay. He let her pass. A woman named Master Holt ran the station. Square-jawed and grim-eyed, she met Alira in a cold room with a map and a bottle of rot-gut whiskey. "You're the one Mirena sent?" "I didn't come to beg," Alira said. "I came to work." Holt studied her. "You have wounds that haven't scarred yet." Alira unbuckled her belt and laid the blood-stained blade on the table. "I know how to use it." Holt tapped the map. "We're stretched thin. Riders don't last. But you want a chance to bite back, you got it." Alira nodded. "Then give me a name." Holt paused. "You sure? I've never been more." Holt slid a paper across the table. "You ever heard of Ezra Lang?" Alira Quince's fingers hovered over the paper, the name glaring up at her like a snake poised to strike. Ezra Lang. She didn't speak it aloud. Some names are safer left inside the mouth, muffled behind the teeth. Her eyes traced the letters. Every stroke of ink, another heartbeat she wished had never returned. Holt leaned back in her chair. "I take it you know him," Alira nodded. "I know what he took." Holt didn't press for more. She seemed the kind of woman who'd seen enough of other people's stories not to need them explained. She poured another measure of whiskey and slid it across the table. "Tell me what you want." Alira didn't hesitate. "A horse, a rifle, a direction." Holt tapped the map again. "He was spotted near Sable Hollow. That's 4 days' hard ride if you don't sleep. 6 if you want to keep your bones intact." Alira took the drink, but didn't sip. "I don't plan to sleep," Holt grunted. "You plan to die?" Her tone wasn't cruel, just blunt. Alira met her gaze. "No, I plan to make someone else." They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally Holt stood. "Follow me." The station stable reeked of wet hay and stubborn horses. Holt led her to a chestnut mare with a scar down its left flank. "Name's Bristle. She bites if she likes you." Bristle snorted and tossed her head as Alira approached, nostrils flaring. Alira extended her hand. The horse didn't bite. But she didn't back up either. Holt smirked. "That'll do." They outfitted her with supplies mostly hardtack, dried meat, and a pouch of bullets that had seen more sun than polish. Holt handed her a battered Winchester rifle and a coil of rope. Alira swung into the saddle, wincing as her healing ribs protested. She ignored them. As she turned Bristle toward the gate, Holt called out, "Don't get clever, Quince. Ezra Lang isn't just a man anymore. He's an idea. And ideas don't die easy." Alira didn't look back. Neither do women with nothing left to lose. The land between the station and Sable Hollow was an unbroken ache of silence. Bristle's hooves stirred, dust from old wagon ruts and scattered dried sage. Coyotes sang at night, their cries stretching like threads through the darkness. Alira rode without speaking, without thinking. Her mind was a locked trunk, every memory sealed behind rusted clasps. But some memories don't stay buried. By the third night, she started to dream, a knife in her thigh. Ezra's voice, smooth as river stones. A question she never answered. Fingers broken one at a time. A woman's scream, hers or someone else's. She didn't know anymore. She woke gasping under the stars, hand around her blade before she even remembered where she was. Bristle stood nearby, calm and unbothered, chewing grass. Alira sat up, covered in sweat, and didn't try to sleep again. Sable Hollow rose from the dust like a bruise. What once might have been a thriving mining camp now festered like a wound that never closed. The buildings leaned like drunks. The rest had been hollowed out by rot and fire. The people were no better. Alira rode in near dusk, passing a man slumped against a post with flies crawling over his eyelids. A boy watched her from a rooftop, a rusted revolver resting on his knee. The saloon door hung from one hinge, swaying like it was trying to decide whether to close forever. She stopped in front of the only building that still looked lived in. A general store with boards nailed haphazardly over the windows and a bell that didn't ring when she pushed the door open. Woman looked up from behind the counter. Stringy blonde hair, hollow cheeks, eyes like cracked glass. "You lost?" she asked. "Looking for a man," Alira said. The woman snorted. "Aren't we all? This one's named Ezra Lang." The woman flinched. Alira noticed. She leaned on the counter. "He's here." Or he was. The woman glanced over her shoulder, then back. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't ask questions here. Don't say names. If you're smart, you'll ride on. I'm not." The woman stared at her, then reached beneath the counter and slid a scrap of folded paper toward her. "He's got a claim west of town. Old Silver Shaft. Says it's haunted. Might even be true. He goes there when he wants to be left alone, which is most of the time." Alira took the note. "Thanks." The woman shook her head. "Don't thank me. Just don't die slow." The Silver Shaft was 2 miles out, past a dead tree that looked like it had been struck by lightning. Alira found it near midnight, the moon overhead casting the whole scene in pale indifference. The mine entrance yawned like a mouth ready to swallow sinners. She dismounted, tied Bristle to a mesquite tree, and walked in. The shaft was narrow, the air stale. Her boots kicked gravel. Her hand stayed on her revolver. Every few feet, she passed old lantern hooks and rusted ore carts. Ghosts lived here, even if only in memory. Then she saw the firelight. A single flicker. Down one tunnel. She followed it. The man by the fire had white in his beard now, but his back was still straight, his shoulders wide. Ezra Lang wore a fine black coat, dusty but expensive. His boots gleamed like they'd never seen mud. He didn't flinch when she stepped into the light. "I heard you were dead," he said, voice soft and smooth. "Not for lack of trying," Alira replied. He gestured at the fire. "Sit. I was wondering when you'd come. I'm not here to talk." Ezra tilted his head. "Then shoot me." "But you won't." "Why not?" He smiled, wolf-like. "Because you need answers. I know you, Alira. You don't sleep without knowing why the knife went in, or who held it." She didn't sit. But she didn't draw either. Ezra poked at the fire with a stick. "You think I ordered what happened to you. But I didn't. Not like you think." She said nothing. He continued, "You were getting too close. Asking too many questions about things that weren't your business. My boys acted first. Too fast. I punished them for it." "Tomas didn't seem punished," Alira said. "Tomas was a mistake." She stepped closer. "So was letting me live, was it?" Ezra stood now. "You came out stronger, meaner, maybe even smarter. You survived what should have killed you. That means something." She stared at him, the fire painting shadows across his face. "I didn't survive because of you. I survived in spite of you, and now you want revenge. I want justice." Ezra opened his arms. "Then do it. Shoot me. But if you do, everything I know dies with me. The names, the ledger, the people who profited off your blood." Alira blinked. "There's a bigger game?" she asked. Ezra nodded. "Much bigger. And you? You're not done. You think I'm the end of your road?" "I'm just the first fork." She wanted to kill him. Her fingers itched. Her breath shook, but he was right. Ezra saw it in her eyes. "Take me in," he said. "Let Holt put me on trial. I'll talk. I'll give you everything. But you have to keep me breathing." Alira exhaled through her teeth. "You don't get mercy. You get truth," he replied. "Or you get blood. You don't get both." Alira lowered her weapon. But only an inch, then we ride at dawn. Ezra nodded. And you best keep me alive. Because if I die before we get there, so do the answers you want most. Behind them, something stirred deeper in the mind. Footsteps. Voices. More men. Ezra paled. They followed you. Alira turned. Her blade sang free. No, she whispered. They followed you, and the dark answered. The mine answered with more than just footsteps. It breathed. A rush of air swept through the shaft as if the mountain itself exhaled, stirring the ash and grit at Alira's feet. The fire between her and Ezra Lang guttered low, the flames dancing sideways, shadows flinging themselves across the walls like panicked birds. Behind them, voices too many, male, armed, not the ragged echoes of drunk gunmen but the clipped commands of soldiers, organized, paid, professional. Alira didn't wait to ask how they found them. She turned and ran. Ezra stumbled after her, his breath loud in the tunnels. He wasn't young anymore, nor lean. He crashed into a timber support beam and hissed out a curse as he followed. The light behind them dimmed. Whoever followed had extinguished their own torches. They wanted to move in the dark, but Alira had learned something about dark long ago. If you know your own shape, you don't need to see it to use it. They ducked into a side shaft, Ezra wheezing, boots scraping against gravel. He muttered something, maybe a prayer, maybe an insult, but Alira didn't slow. Her hand reached the small lantern she carried tucked in her belt. She didn't light it. She smashed it instead. Glass shattered, oil spilled. She struck a match. The tunnel behind them exploded with flame. For an instant, the whole world turned white-orange. Heat roared through the mine like a beast let loose, chasing them forward as smoke curled from the side tunnel, swallowing the men who followed. Ezra stared back, eyes wide. You could have killed us. Only if I missed, Alira said. And I don't miss anymore. They broke daylight at the mine's eastern ridge just before dawn. Alira dragged Ezra by the collar up the last slope. He collapsed to the ground at the top, gasping, his hands scorched from crawling. Below them, a narrow canyon opened like a wound. A stream curled at its base. Trees leaned close, suspicious of the sun. Ezra rolled over. They'll still be behind us. Alira ignored him. Her eyes searched the ridge beyond the canyon. She saw it movement. A rider. 2, 3, then a flag. Station. She had sent word ahead, and Holt had listened. Alira turned to Ezra. On your feet, he grimaced. I'm not 20 anymore, Quince. No, but you're still breathing. Let's keep it that way. They descended into the canyon, halfway down. The echo of gunfire split the dawn. Alira shoved Ezra behind a boulder as splinters ripped through the brush. Bullets struck dirt. Her rifle was in her hands before the second shot. She peeked. 4 men on the opposite ridge, long rifles. Come. Paid to kill. Keep your head down. She barked at Ezra. He obeyed. Lira took a breath and counted. 1, 2. She popped up and fired. One shot clipped a man's shoulder. Another cracked a rifle barrel. The third missed, but it was enough. They scattered. From the north, a whistle rang out. The station's riders. Alira stood tall and raised her arms. Holt led the charge, her horse skidding to a halt beside them. You look worse than the stories, she said. But I brought the bastard. Alira replied. Ezra grunted, holding up his scorched hands. She tried to kill me 3 times. You should give her a medal. Oh, I plan to. Holt nodded to her men. Cuff him. Quince, you ride with me. Alira climbed onto the nearest horse, wincing. Her shoulder burned from a fall. Her throat was raw from smoke, but she was alive. And so was Ezra Lang, for now. Back at the station, Ezra was locked away, and Holt summoned her into the main room. The lanterns were lit low, and the table covered. In files and maps, Lang talked, Holt said. He gave names, documents, ledgers, took hours, but he didn't hold back. Alira stood still. He gave us a network, judges, sheriffs, private militias paid by mining barons and landowners. Your assault wasn't just personal. It was institutional. Alira's. Hands curled into fists. We can break it now, Holt said. If you're willing to help, how? Train riders, lead strikes. Expose the ones in shadow. And Ezra? Trial. He might not live to see it, but he'll die in a cage, Alira nodded. Then she said the thing that had haunted her since the mine. He said he wasn't the last name. Holt raised an eyebrow. Who did he name last? Alira hesitated. Then, Judge Ravel. Out of Turn Crossing. Holt swore under her breath. He's connected to the governor. If Lang's telling the truth, it means the rot runs to the top. It does, Alira said. I've seen it. I bled under it. Holt exhaled. Then we take it apart. Piece by piece. Where do we start? Holt looked her dead in the eye. With a warrant. And a rope. Alira turned toward the door. She would not rest. Not yet. The story took US a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. 2 weeks later, they rode into Turn Crossing under false names. Alira wore a deputy's badge. Holt posed as a federal liaison. Ravel didn't recognize her at first. He was hosting a banquet full of suits and silver. Alira walked through the crowd with a smile that could cut bone. When she laid the warrant on the table, Ravel blinked, then sneered. You think that paper means anything? I own this town. Holt stepped forward. Not anymore. Behind her, 24 riders stormed in. The station's finest. Ravel reached for his pistol. Alira shot. First. Not to kill. To remind. Her bullet shattered the glass beside his hand. He froze. We're not afraid anymore, she said. They took him in chains. And the town watched. That night, Alira stood on the edge of the crossing, looking down at the river. Marina had written. The letter was simple. They came for me. I was ready. They're gone now. I'm tired, but alive. You gave me time. I gave you strength. Alira folded the paper. She wasn't done. But for the first time, she wasn't alone either. The wind shifted. She turned toward it. Ryder approached. Not Holt. Someone new. Young. Shaky. Hopeful. You're her? The rider asked. The one who took down Lang? I am, Alira said. I want to learn. Alira nodded. Then she pointed west. Then ride with me. And they did. Toward the next name. Toward the next reckoning. The blood on her coat had faded, but her memory never would. The boy's name was Callan Trask. He couldn't have been more than 18, though the way he held his reins white-knuckled, with the twitchy nerves of someone not yet used to killing, put him closer to 17. He had the broad shoulders of a farmhand, the sunburnt skin of a field boy, and the eyes of someone who'd seen something too terrible to name and decided not to look away. Alira Quince rode beside him in silence for the better part of a day. They didn't speak much, but she noticed the way he mimicked her, how he watched her every hand motion, every glance down the trail. When she adjusted the weight of her rifle in its sling, so did he. When she dismounted to check for signs in the dust, he tried to stand where she stood. He wasn't here to play cowboy. He was here to learn, and she was here to teach. They made camp beneath a gnarled pine on the slope overlooking the broken spine of a valley below. Smoke curled from distant chimneys in a town too small for maps and too stubborn for ghosts. It was called Dyer's Hollow. Most passed through without a second glance, but Alira knew the name. Holt had circled it on the map. Another name lived. Therej, E.B. Dre, enforcer for the Judge Network Ezra Lang had exposed, former sheriff. Rumored to have buried more people than he arrested. It was said he retired. But evil men don't retire. They root deeper. She sat by the fire, sharpening her blade. Callan watched. After a while he asked, "How many names you got left?" She didn't look up. Enough. And after that? After that I breathed different. He nodded as if that made sense. Maybe it did. Dyer's Hollow didn't welcome strangers. Men stood on porches with shotguns resting in their elbows like children. Women narrowed their eyes behind sun-bleached curtains. No one smiled. Alira rode in with Callan half a length behind her. His shoulders were set, his face tight. They tied their horses outside a weather-warped saloon that had lost its signboard. The only letters left were DA, everything else eaten by wind or bullet holes. Inside, silence dropped like a hammer. She walked to the bar. 2 waters, she said. The barkeep, a man with a knife scar across one cheek, poured them without speaking. Leaned on the bar, her voice low. Where's Dre? No answer. Callan started to speak, but she raised a finger. She turned slowly, facing the room. Jeb Dre. I know he's here. Or someone knows where he is. Either way, I get my answer. Question is whether I pay for it in coin or blood. Stillness. Then, a man in the back corner rose. Wide shoulders. Faded red vest. Gray in his beard. I know you. Alira studied him. Then you know what comes next. The man laughed once. Bitter. You think you're hunting a man, but Dre? He owns this town. He's law here, not anymore. Who says so? She unpinned the folded document from her belt. Federal authority. Warrant signed by Holt herself. The man's lip curled. You gonna serve that? Or die holding it? Whichever gets me to Dre faster. He stared a long moment. Then he whistled. Outside. Hooves pounded the dust. Men gathered. Callan backed toward the door, hand on his revolver. Alira didn't move. From the shadows of the saloon, a second man stepped forward, tall, coiled like a rattler. A badge still gleamed on his vest, though the star was tarnished. Dre. He looked at her. You the one took down Lang? I am, he smiled. Good. I've been meaning to see how deep your blood runs. Then bleed me and find out. Dre glanced around. The saloon. No one moved. You want a shootout in here? He asked. Alira nodded. I want justice. Shootout or not. He drew. So did she. The first shot knocked the drink from the bar. The second punched through a lantern. The third tore through Dre's coat. Then Alira dropped to one knee. Her fourth shot hit his shoulder. He grunted. Stumbled back. Callan fired once, hitting the floor beside Dre's boot. A warning. Dre sneered. You brought a boy? He's here to learn what justice looks like when it's dirty. Dre raised his pistol. Callan shot him in the thigh. The town held its breath. Dre dropped his weapon. Blood seeped through his pants. Alira walked up to him, grabbed the badge from his chest, and tossed it into the dirt. Justice served, she said. They didn't stay long. They left Dre cuffed and unconscious, tied to his own horse. A messenger from the station would collect him. Alira and Callan rode out as the sun dropped behind the cliffs. She didn't look back. Callan did. She saw it in his eyes. The question. She answered before he asked. If you start counting how many people you leave in chains, it's a short road to forgetting. Which ones needed killing instead? Callan nodded. But he didn't smile. By the next campfire, Callan had questions. You ever lose a fight? Yes. What happened? I lived. He chewed that over. Why do you keep going? She didn't speak for a while. Then, because someone needs to. He watched the fire. Then, I think I want to be someone like that. She nodded. Then stay alive long enough to learn how. Ryder found them 3 days later. Holt's seal on the letter. New name. New target. A woman this time. Magda Klein, rancher, banker, beneath. Her books was a ledger of every payoff and hush bribe that kept corrupt lawmen in power across the valley. She lived in gold trim and silk gloves, a queen behind a desk. You ready? Alira asked Callan. He nodded. Ready to watch a queen fall. And they rode. The road to Magda Klein's ranch was carved through land that had never forgotten the weight of blood. Callan. Trask said nothing for the first 2 days of riding. But Alira Quince could tell his thoughts were running ahead of them, fast tripping over one another like greenhorns in the stampede. She understood. Magda wasn't like Dre. Dre was a bully with a badge, thick-fisted and arrogant. You could smell the violence on him like old sweat. But Magda Klein? She was violence that smiled while shaking your hand, the kind that built her empire on the bones of others and then handed out charity to their orphans. Callan finally broke the silence on the third night as they set camp on the southern rim of Black Point Ridge. Below them, the Klein estate glittered like a coin tossed into the dark. You ever met her? He asked once. Alira crouched by the fire, poking at the coals. Before everything. Before the blood. What was she like? Charming, clean, polished like the barrel of a gun you never see coming. He nodded and looked away. You scared? She asked. Callan hesitated. Not of dying. Of what then? Of not making a difference. Alira nodded slowly. That never stops, Callan. Not even after the names are gone. The Klein estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion. White pillars. Silver. Trim. Servants dressed better than some bankers. Guards at the gates who wore smiles and pistols with equal ease. Alira didn't ride in under cover of darkness. She rode in through the front gate. Callan followed, trying not to look like he expected to die. The guards stepped forward, but one. Look at Alira's warrant and badge. And they hesitated. One of them, a tall man with too many rings on his fingers, tipped his hat. Wait here, he said, voice oily. Madame Klein will receive you. They waited in the foyer, under a chandelier made of imported crystal and cruelty. Then she came, Magda Klein. She was older now. But the years had kissed her gently. Not a wrinkle dared mark her cheek. Her hair was pinned with jade, and her eyes were the cold green of glass left to chill in winter. She held out a gloved hand. Alira didn't take it. Magda smiled anyway. Miss Quince, I thought the stories were just that. Stories. I thought the same about you. Magda turned, skirts rustling like silk over bone. Shall we talk in private? Alira gestured to Callan. He stays. Magda raised an eyebrow but made no protest. The study smelled of cedar and expensive ink. Magda poured herself tea. Didn't offer them any. You've come with a warrant, I assume. I have. May I see it? Alira handed it over. Magda read it with the expression of someone reviewing an inconvenient menu. This will not hold, she said. The governor owes me more than you know, and I owe the dead more than he owes you. Magda set the paper down. You know how this ends. You in chains. Or a pine box. You think I'll go quietly. I hope you don't, Magda laughed. You are everything. They whispered. She rang a bell. The doors burst open. Guards. 6 of them. Callan drew his revolver. Alira stayed still. I figured it would be this way, she said. So I came prepared. She whistled. Outside. 3 riders burst from the tree station deputies, sent ahead by Holt. They threw smoke grenades into the hall. Chaos. Ira dropped behind a desk. Callan fired, hitting a guard in the leg. Magda tried to flee. Alira tackled her. The 2 women crashed to the floor, furniture toppling around them. Magda slashed with a hidden blade. Alira blocked it, twisted her arm, and pinned her. You're under arrest, she growled. Magda spat blood. So were you once, and I didn't stay there. She bound her hands. Callan covered the door. When the smoke cleared, Magda Klein, queen of corruption, was shackled like the rest. The ride back was silent. Magda said nothing. Alira didn't gloat. Callan watched her. You okay? He asked. No, Alira said. But I'm not done either. They reached the station at dawn. Holt met them. Her eyes widened at the sight of Magda. Well, I'll be damned. You still might be, Alira said. Holt smiled. Then let's make it worth the price. They locked Magda. Deep beneath the station. Ira watched the door close. She didn't feel victory, only the weight of one. Less name. Callan sat beside her that night, by a fire that crackled like old wood. Trying to forget how it burned. That the worst of them? He asked, "No, who is?" Elira's jaw tightened. Judge Corman. He runs the files, the blacklists. Every woman like me who was tossed away, he made the list. Where is he? She looked west, capital city, surrounded by walls. Men with orders to shoot first and ask questions never. Callan looked at the fire, then back at her. When do we ride? Elira exhaled. Tomorrow. They rode at first light. Not alone. Holt sent 6 deputies. One of them was Marina Dahl. She didn't speak as she joined the group. Just nodded once at Elira. That was enough. They rode like a storm given bones. Toward the final reckoning. Toward Judge Corman. And whatever waited behind the last name. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The capital didn't rise out of the plains. It broke them. The roads leading to it were lined with ash-colored fences and watchtowers that didn't bother to hide their rifles. The city sat like a spider in the middle of a web made from old money. Silent threats and the bones of those who'd once tried to change it. Elira Quince had never come this far east. Not before. Not even when she was still bleeding from the night they buried her name. Now she rode straight for the courthouse steps. Callan Trask flanked her left. Marina Dahl was to her right. Behind them, 6 riders from Holt Station. They weren't wearing uniforms. Just dust and courage. Ahead lay Judge Corman, the last name on the list. The one who hadn't just signed off on the orders that had gutted the country's justice system, but the man who designed it, brick by brick. Who wrote laws so sharp they bled the ones meant to be protected. Who laughed, often, in courtrooms stained with stories. They didn't plan to shoot him, not yet. They planned to make him seen. It began in the lower districts. Word spread faster than telegram wires. She's here. The one who made Lang kneel. The one who put Klein in chains. Vendors whispered it between slaps of butcher cleavers. Children ran block to block, chanting her name. Soldiers on street corners eyed the riders with suspicion. But they didn't move. Not yet. Callan leaned over in the saddle. How many think we'll walk out of here alive? Elira didn't answer, not because she didn't know, but because there were better questions. The courthouse steps were marble and empty when they arrived. Elira dismounted first, tied her horse loosely to a post, adjusted her coat. Marina dismounted next. Her rifle was slung over one shoulder. Her eyes scanned every rooftop. Callan hesitated. Then followed. Elira stepped up, onto the bottom stair, unrolled the parchment Holt had pressed into her hand before the journey. It wasn't a warrant. It was a statement, signed by every survivor they'd found. A ledger of names, crimes, testimonies, pages of proof. She read the first few lines aloud. People began to gather. A merchant with flour-stained fingers. A woman with 2 children clinging to her skirt. An old man with a prosthetic arm. Jaw set like iron. Guards shifted along the building's edge. A door opened, and out walked Judge Malcolm Corman. He wore black like a priest. Hair combed straight. His eyes squinted into the sunlight with practiced disdain. He didn't speak. Not at first. He let her read 2 more names before lifting his hand. Enough. Elira stopped. Corman descended the stairs with the slow, steady poise of a man convinced nothing could touch him. He looked her over. Then Callan. Then Marina. I should have had you buried deeper, he said. You tried, Elira replied. He gestured toward the parchment. This will be contested. You have no jurisdiction. Here. Justice doesn't recognize borders, Marina said. Callan stepped forward. We're not leaving without a reckoning, Corman smiled. Then you'll die for nothing. He raised a hand. A whistle blew. Suddenly, soldiers poured out of alleys. 10, 20, 30. Guns raised. Elira didn't flinch. She turned to the crowd. Held up the parchment. If we fall here, she said, voice sharp as thunder, remember this. Remember what he did to your sisters. Your sons, your fathers. We carry your voices. If they kill us, let it be the last lie they bury. The people stirred. A man stepped forward, then another and another. Unarmed, but tall with purpose. The soldiers hesitated. Morena raised her rifle. Drop them. The lead guard didn't. Callan raised his dot, still nothing. Then a horn sounded from the west end of the square. Dozens more riders appeared. Holt at the front. Station flags held high. Backup had come. Now the numbers were even. Illyra didn't look at Corman Dot. She spoke only to the crowd. This is your city. This is your moment. The walls are only tall until you climb them, and the crowd surged. The soldiers pulled back. Corman stepped behind them. Pale, Illyra pointed. He is no judge. He is no law. He is a liar in robes. They seized him. The crowd didn't cheer. They watched as Corman was shackled, watched as the names were read, watched as their silence shattered. Dot by nightfall, the capital was under new eyes. Holt's riders secured the courthouse. The files were opened. The ledgers copied. Magda Klein, from her cell, signed a full confession to save her own neck. Lang testified via a written statement that would haunt the city. For years, the system didn't fall, but it cracked. And through those cracks, light poured. 3 days later, Illyra stood by the gallows. Corman did not beg. He merely asked if she felt powerful. She answered, no, I feel clean. The trapdoor opened. History sighed. She didn't stay. Didn't stay for the elections, or the headlines, or the monuments. She rode west. Morena returned to the hills. Said she was going to build something that lasted longer than vengeance. Callan stayed in the capital. They offered him a badge. He turned it down, but he trained others. And when the stories were told to new recruits, they spoke of the boy who had once ridden beside the prairie. Shadow. They never used her name, only the truth, that she came from nowhere, smelled like blood, knocked on a widow's door, and changed everything. Years later, children played by a tree where no town had stood before. A saloon stood there now, and a library. No fences, no gallows. Just people, just peace. And in the corner of the square, a plaque, carved in wood, smoothed by time. It read, she walked through fire and made the rain follow. The wind carried dust across the new town square, where a fountain had been erected over the very spot where the gallows once stood. The stone basin, carved by Callan Trask and several of his rookies, caught the pale morning light and reflected it into the faces of a gathering crowd. Illyra Quince watched from the edge of the crowd, half hidden by the folds of her duster. Her eyes, as always, were alert. It had been 5 years since the capital fell silent under the weight of Judge Corman's downfall. In that time, communities had sprung up across the frontier, each claiming a fragment of the justice she'd given them. This place, built around the old saloon and the library, was called New Haven, and it thrived on the promise she'd made to a widow on a dark night, that change could blossom where nothing else would grow. Children chased laughter through the fountain's spray. Merchants hawked leather goods and books rescued from burned courthouses. A band played a ragged tune on a wooden stage at the far end of the square. Peace, it seemed, had become a commodity. Callan approached, his steps silent on the sandstone paving. His hair was longer now, and his face carried the faint lines of responsibility. He nodded once, then turned back toward the ledger house, where records of wrongs and rights lay side by side. Illyra followed him inside. The ledger house was a library and a memorial, its walls lined with shelves bearing hundreds of volumes. Each leather-bound cover was stamped with the name of a settlement she had helped save and of a mine she had freed. At the center, a new book waited, bound in midnight blue hide. Its title, in silver leaf, read simply, Unfinished Business. Callan opened it, blank pages waiting. We don't add anything here until it's earned, he said. Illyra placed a hand on the spine. And what if a name refuses to be written? He looked up, meeting her gaze. Then we ride again. The words felt familiar. That evening, a rider arrived at the gates. A single messenger, dust-choked and blood-stained. He bowed low before Chief Bayleaf Trask. "Miss Quince," he gasped, voice broken by dust. "Your help is needed in Marley's End." "They say the bloodstain never dries," Illyra straightened. Marley's End, a settlement she had passed on her first journey, one she never stopped to help. The stories said a cruel landlord had extorted his workers, then burned their homes when they could no longer pay. The survivors had fled, but the landlord stayed untouched by the law. She had heard his name once. In hushed tones, Tomlin Ward. Callan closed the ledger. He shed his badge and motioned toward Illyra. "Unfinished business," he said. She nodded. And they rode at dawn. The trail to Marley's End was choked with charcoal and ruin. Trees, once proud, stood like skeletal sentries scorched by flame. The wind carried the acrid scent of smoke mixed with something older, the metallic tang of fear. Callan led, but Illyra walked beside him, her coat open so that the crest of new Haven 2 crossed rifles over a book was visible. At the ridge above the town, they found signs of struggle. A broken wagon, its wheels melted into the dirt. Shallow graves half carved in the hillside. And footprints, barefoot, desperate, and fleeing. As they reached the crest, a shape moved below, a tall figure in a black coat, standing in the town's burnt-out plaza. Tomlin Ward. His face was gaunt, his eyes cold metal. Ward raised one hand. "I anticipated you," he called out across the valley. Illyra surveyed him. "I'm here to finish what I started." Ward laughed, a hollow sound that echoed among the ruins. "You finished nothing then. Why start now?" She stepped forward, voice carrying. "Because some debts don't wait for forgiveness. They demand payment, and some stories are still being written." Behind her, Callan unslung his rifle. Marina's silhouette emerged at the tree line, flanked by New Haven's riders. Ward narrowed his eyes. "You think you can burn me out, drive me away? This land belongs to no one now." Illyra's lips curved. "You belong to the land, and it remembers what you did." She glanced at Callan. He nodded. And they advanced together into Marley's End. The first names already written in the new ledger: Draysel Manor, Thorns Crossing, Dyer's Hollow. Now it was Ward's turn. The town's ghosts watched. And the wind carried their whispers. She stands at the edge of oblivion. She holds the pen. She decides if the ending is deserved. Before the sun could set, Marley's End would speak again. The sun leaned low over Marley's End, gilding the scorched rooftops in red. Smoke coiled between chimneys long abandoned, and every window stared back like a blind, burned eye. Silence gripped the town, but it was a silence too heavy, too aware, as if the buildings were holding their breath. Illyra Quince led the way down the main street. Callan Trask flanked her, rifle in hand. Marina Dahl and 3 more riders spread into alleys and side paths. Above them, crows circled, fat and slow. Even the scavengers had grown used to the flavor of violence here. Tomlin Ward didn't run. He stood in the center of the square with a calm that set Illyra's teeth on edge. Behind him, 4 men in old uniforms, private enforcers, not military. Their badges were mismatched and meaningless. Ward's voice rang out. "You come to judge me, Quince. You forget I outlived judgment." She stopped 10 paces away. "No. I remember. That's why I'm here." He smiled, sun catching on a gold tooth. "And the boy? Still think he can stand between you and another grave?" Callan's grip on the rifle tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. Illyra didn't blink. "He's here to make sure there's only one more grave today." Ward's smirk faded. The firefight broke with a whistle, not from Illyra, not from Ward. From a rooftop where a hidden sniper had waited, finger curled against the trigger of a repeating rifle. The shot cracked through the square, grazing Marina's arm as she ducked for cover. Then chaos. Ward's enforcers opened fire. One went down to Callan's first round. Another fell when Alira rolled behind a rusted pump cart and returned. Fire from beneath. Smoke swallowed the square. Gunshots lit it like sparks in a furnace. From the alley, Marina shouted, "Two flanking left." Alira moved fast. She sprinted across the road, ducked beneath a falling sign, and shoulder-checked a gunman against a wall. Her blade slid clean between ribs, and the man dropped without a word. She turned too late. A shadow loomed. The sniper had come down. Saw him first. Alira. She twisted as the man fired. The bullet ripped through her shoulder. Pain flared, hot, white, blinding. But she stayed on her feet. She turned and fired back. One shot. Then another. The sniper staggered. Fell. Ira dropped to one knee. Blood soaked her coat. Callan reached her. Pressed cloth to the wound. "You're hit." "I noticed," she hissed. Marina joined them. "We've got the square. Ward's gone." Alira gritted her teeth. "He won't go far." They found him holed up in a collapsed train depot outside town. Marina and the others circled wide. Callan led Alira through the front. Ward waited inside, pistol drawn, eyes wild. "You think you can erase me?" he screamed. "You think this ledger of yours means anything?" Alira leaned against a beam, breath ragged. "This isn't about erasing you," she said. "It's about remembering what you tried to bury." He raised the pistol. Callan fired first. The bullet hit Ward in the hand. The gun clattered to the floor. Ward dropped to his knees. He looked up at Alira. "You won't kill me," he spat. She stepped forward, eyes cold. "No, I'll leave you to them." Behind her, survivors of Marley's End emerged, drawn by the smoke, the noise, the hope. Faces she remembered from that first ride through. Children now grown, mothers now widows, old men now walking with carved canes and hollow eyes. One by one, they stared at Ward. And one by one, they turned their backs. Not forgiveness. Condemnation. They left him in silence. That night, the fire burned clean. They lit a pyre in the center of town, not for bodies, but for fear. Alira watched from a crate, her shoulder bound in rough linen. Callan sat beside her. "You shouldn't have taken that shot," he said. "I'll take worse before this is done," she replied. Marina brought 2 cups of water. "No whiskey tonight." "Not in this town." "What now?" she asked. All Ira sipped. "Now we rebuild it, and we write it down." Callan opened his notebook. "What name?" Alira stared into the fire. "Call it what it was," she said. "Marley's End, no longer." He wrote it down. And beneath the name, one sentence. "Justice came on horseback and left on foot because it stayed." In the weeks that followed, the town rose again. Ward was imprisoned, not hanged. Alira insisted. Some evils must live. Long enough to be forgotten by time, not myth. The fields reopened. Water pumps were repaired. New Haven sent teachers, carpenters, doctors, and in the square, where the first bullet had struck, they set a stone. Beneath the sun and soil lie stories we once feared. We do not fear them anymore. A month later, a letter arrived in New Haven, sealed in wax. No return. Inside, a single name. Not from the old list. Not from the ledger. From a child. A girl named Brea, she wrote. "There's a man in Wellspring who locks girls in barns until they stop talking. He says they talk too loud, too long, too different." Alira read the letter twice. She looked at Callan. Then at Marina. Neither spoke. She folded the page, slipped it into her coat. "It's a long road to Wellspring," she said. Marina smiled. "Then we better leave early," Callan nodded. "I'll pack the ledgers." And they rode again, because the stories never ended, only the names changed. The road to Wellspring was longer than any they'd taken before, not in miles, but in weight. Lyra Quince felt it in her bones. Not the pull of age, but the gravity of repetition. Every step her horse took across the cracked earth was a step further from rest, further from the promise of ever setting the ledger down for good. Beside her, Callan rode silent. He was leaner now, harder. His eyes, once filled with questions, now held answers he never wanted. Behind them, Marina Dow rode with two others, Eli Gant, a former railman with nerves of stone, and Noah Winfrey, a sharp-eyed woman whose sister had vanished years ago in the same region they now approached. The name on the letter had been crude, scratched in charcoal by a shaking child, Mr. Rake. He wasn't in any registry, wasn't known to the regional judges, not even as a rumor. Stories drifted like smoke, girls disappearing, barns locked tight in the rain, screams ignored by the townsfolk who said nothing bad ever happened in Wellspring because they never let bad be seen. They arrived at dusk. Wellspring looked like a painting, neat fences, whitewashed homes, flower boxes beneath every window, children playing jump rope in the lanes. Too perfect. It made Lyra's skin itch. The mayor greeted them in a crisp vest and bright tie. His name was Harold Keene, and he smiled like someone who practiced it daily. "What brings you to our quiet little corner, Marshal Quince?" he asked. Lyra didn't answer. Callan spoke instead. "Looking into a letter we received. Concern from a local family." Keene's smile flickered. "Well, surely it's a misunderstanding. We don't have much trouble out here. We keep to ourselves." "So we've heard," Marina said. He offered lodging. Lyra refused. They set camp outside the fence line, just within sight of the water tower. That night, they watched and saw nothing. The second day brought fog. Thick, soupy fog that coiled around houses and swallowed sound. Marina split off to search the church records. Noah questioned a cluster of children at the edge of town. Eli posed as a passing merchant and struck up conversation with stable boys and kitchen hands. Callan and Lyra walked. They watched the barns. 3 of them ringed the southern fields. One newer than the rest, steel locks, reinforced door. "That's the one," Callan said. Lyra nodded. "We wait until nightfall." They came with no torches, only silence and the moon. Callan picked the lock. Marina stood watch. Lyra entered first. Inside, it was cold. And quiet. Then movement. A girl no older than 13 sat in the far corner. Bruises darkened her wrists. A gag hung loose around her neck. Lyra knelt. "My name is Lyra. We're here to help." The girl said nothing, only nodded. More movement. 2 more girls behind hay bales. 4 in total. Noah stepped forward, her face pale. "One of them matches my sister's description. From 3 years ago." They led the girls out. Halfway across the field, a whistle blew. Gunfire erupted. It came from the ridge. 6 men, rifles gleaming, descended with military precision. Eli returned fire. Callan shoved Lyra to the side. Covering the girls, Marina dropped one of the attackers before they reached the fence line. The girls ran. Lyra stood, pain in her shoulder flaring from the Marley's end wound. She shot, once, twice. Then silence. 5 bodies lay still. The 6th crawled toward a horse. Callan caught him, dragged him to the fire. "Name," Lyra demanded. The man spat. "You're too late." "He's gone." "Rake?" The man laughed. "You think he'd be here?" "He'd built this place, bought the mayor, bought the silence. He's 3 towns over, on the move. You'll never catch him." Lyra stood, turned to Callan. "We ride now. You're bleeding. So is time." They rode 3 days. That's how long the trail took. Through swamps, over mountains, past abandoned mills and broken towns that had never gotten their Lyra Quince. Each place had a whisper. Each whisper said the same thing. Rake is moving children, selling them, calling it boarding, teaching silence as survival. They reached Copper Hollow at dawn, a rail town. 2 tracks, 1 inn. 100 buildings and every one of them rotting beneath. Bright signs and hollow promises. He was there. Rake, tall, bald, eyes like slits. They found him in the market, haggling with a woman over the price of a travel crate. Alira didn't hesitate. She strode forward and pulled him to the ground. He screamed, drew a hidden blade. Callan shot the knife from his hand. Rake cursed. You have no idea what you're interfering with. I provide services. I give them homes. Alira knelt beside him. You give them silence. I give them names. Rake stood trial in New Haven. Not in secret. Public. The girls testified. Marina testified. Her sister. Safe now, watching from the benches. The people listened, and the ledger recorded. When it was done, Alira stepped forward and read a passage written by the girl who'd sent the letter, Brea. He told me I was too loud, so I whispered. He told me I was too slow, so I ran. But when I finally knocked on the wall hard enough, someone heard me. The court sentenced Rake to life beneath the mountain, a mine cell where the silence he had forced would echo back at him forever. Alira stood on the courthouse steps, Callan beside her, Marina behind, Noah and her sister holding hands. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "Next." Callan held out a letter from a woman in Cutter's Run. Up, single line. They put a collar on my daughter and said she belonged to the state. Alira folded it, slipped it into the ledger, and stepped down the stairs. Because the work never stopped. Because the world never stopped asking. And because her answer had always been the same, yes. The path to Cutter's Run began with frost. The cold came early that season. Frost rimmed every leaf like lace, turned dirt trails brittle, and coated saddles with thin silver by dawn. But Alira Quince rode without hesitation, as if winter had no say over her momentum. Behind her, Callan Trask adjusted the packhorse. Marina Dahl flanked the rear. The girl Noah's sister, her name was Ressa, now traveled with them, not as a victim, but as a chronicler. She carried the second ledger, binding its spine with silk from New Haven's old court banners, and in her satchel, folded and reread until the ink had begun to fade, was the letter from Cutter's Run. They put a collar on my daughter and said she belonged to the state. No name. No return address. Just that. That was enough. Cutter's Run sat in a gulch where 3 rivers met. The rivers were dry, now diverted, dammed, or poisoned upstream. What remained was a cluster of buildings wrapped in barbed wire and silence. Alira and her team arrived just past the equinox. Their welcome was frostbitten. Men in gray uniforms patrolled the town's edge. Their weapons were standard-issue military, but their insignia wasn't national. Just a brass plate with a stamped number. S.81. State Station, 81. Callan narrowed his eyes. Private Policing Corps. Marina spat in the dirt. Off books. Alira's mouth tightened. We've seen worse. But even she could feel it. This place was colder than the weather. They entered posing as surveyors. Ressa passed as Alira's assistant. Her pen sketched maps while her eyes read mouths, studying what the locals didn't say. The town square was almost empty. A school stood on the north ridge, tall and pale. No children played in its yard. At the far end, a processing station marked with iron bars and a loading platform. No sign of livestock. Just one small wooden sign. For custodial use only. Alira approached a vendor, one of the few not in uniform, looking for someone, she said. Girl, 10 to 12, brown hair. Walks like she knows she's being watched. The vendor, an older woman with cracked hands, didn't look up, just muttered, warehouse. 3 blocks east. Don't speak her name. Alira didn't ask why. She walked east. And found warehouse 12. Inside. Cages. Not iron. Psychological. Girls lined against a wall in plain gray uniforms. No collars, now bracelets instead. Steel bands with serial numbers. One of them looked up. Eyes wide. She mouthed one word. Run. Too late. The siren blared. From above, boots thundered down iron stairs. S-81 agents raised rifles, shouting orders Alira didn't bother listening to. She grabbed the girl, pulled her close. Brace your ears, she whispered. Then she threw a flare. It burst mid-air, blinding, red, hot. Smoke filled the space. Girls screamed, but Alira's voice cut through. Stay low. Follow me, now. Callan was at the exit. Marina covering from the rooftops. Ressa led the other girls. They moved fast. 2 blocks. Then 3. A bullet ripped Alira's sleeve. Another cracked stone by her boot. But they didn't stop. They made camp deep in the trees past the gulch. Girls were quiet at first. Then one tall, scraped knees, fierce eyes spoke. You're Alira Quince. Alira raised an eyebrow. I read about you. In the hidden papers. The ones they burn if they find them. You believe everything you read? Alira asked. The girl grinned. Only the parts that make the wrong people mad. Her name was Luna. She was 12. And she had the bruises to prove it. She also had a name to share. Director Malin Voss. Head of S-81. Creator of the custodial designation. Alira knew that name, and she knew where to find him. Voss lived in Whittigate, a town 5 days north, built on ivory stone and blood taxes. They left at first light. Ressa rode with the girls. Callan and Marina flanked a supply cart borrowed from a sympathetic miller. Alira rode ahead, and when they arrived, she didn't wait for darkness. She marched straight to the courthouse. Voss wasn't in court. He was in the balcony lounge. Eating cake. A waiter tried to stop her. She shoved him aside. Voss looked up. Fork paused mid-air. He knew her. She saw it in his eyes. Alira Quince, he said. Slow, careful. Come to negotiate? She flipped a folder onto the table. Inside, photographs, witness statements, ledger copies, and Ressa's hand-drawn map of Warehouse 12. No, she said. I came to prosecute. He stood. You're not a judge. No, but I make sure the right ones listen. The trial didn't happen in WHITEG. It happened in New Haven. The girls testified. The ledger grew. Voss called a dozen lawyers. They all failed because the truth was too thick to cut, because the crowd was louder than his defense, because Luna stood, pointed at him, and said, "That's the man who made me sleep on cold stone and call it a lesson." The court sentenced him to silent servitude. He would teach girls to read now. In the very buildings. He used to imprison them. And the girls would write whatever they wanted, especially about him. Later, as the sun dipped behind the ledge above New Haven, Alira stood in the schoolyard. Luna walked beside her. They said justice doesn't bring things back. The girl murmured. Al-Iyari knelt. It doesn't, but it makes the future harder to steal. Luna hugged her, and Ressa wrote, Cutter's Run had no rivers, but now it has roots. And the frost melted not because of fire, but because someone stood still long enough to warm the earth. A knock sounded at Alira's door. Callan entered. He held another letter. This one was folded in oilskin. No name. Just 3 words scrawled in the corner. Church of Fallow, Alira. Read it once. Then twice. She looked at Callan. He nodded. She didn't pack much, just the ledger and the pen, because the road still stretched. And the silence still waited to be broken. The road to the Church of Fallow did not appear on maps. It wound through pine forests that whispered, across ravines stitched with ancient rope bridges, through valleys where fog clung like breath. The path wasn't just forgotten, it had been erased, but Alira Quince had never followed maps. She followed letters. She followed whispers. She followed the trail of pain that pretended to be silence. And so, she found it. The church stood alone in a hollow, not ruined, pristine, whitewashed. Walls. Copper roof. A spire that reached into the clouds, but the air around it felt wrong, too quiet, too staged. Birds didn't sing near it. The trees bowed away from it. Aya reined in her horse at the ridge and studied it. Callan Trask rode up beside her. No sign of townsfolk. Marina Dow emerged from the tree line behind them. I scouted south. There's a road, but no wagons, no tracks in days. Ressa stayed back with Luna and 2 more girls they'd taken under protection after Cutter's Run. The girls were safe for now in a camp guarded by New Haven's riders. Alira's eyes narrowed. Someone's there, but they don't want to be seen. Or they don't want to be questioned. She turned to Callan. You brought the page? He handed her the letter. The one marked Church of Thallow. Inside, it was no plea, no details. Just a child's drawing, crude. Frantic lines of a man in black robes dragging a girl by the wrist into a building with no windows. That building was real. They approached at dusk. No guards. No fences. But as they passed under the boughs of the last pine tree, a voice echoed from the bell tower. Turn back. This is sacred ground. Alira didn't flinch. We've come to ask questions. The voice again. Questions poison the soul. Marina murmured. Sounds like a sermon I'd burn. Alira stepped forward. Then consider us already condemned. Pause. Then the doors opened. Inside, the church smelled of cedar and smoke. The pews were empty. But on the altar stood a tall man in black robes, hooded, face obscured. His voice was calm. Too calm. You carry violence on your breath. Alira nodded. We carry truth. Sometimes the two arrive together. Callan took a step closer. We're looking for children. The man tilted his head. We have no children here. Only disciples. Those who come to shed their former selves. Marina's jaw tightened. You mean those taken? He ignored her. They're not lost. They're reborn. This world is chaos. We offer them peace. Alira's hand rested on the hilt of her blade. Peace isn't obedience, and children don't choose silence. The man lifted his head just enough for the candlelight to touch his face. He had no eyes, just smooth, healed skin over empty sockets. I see more than you think, he said. We're led deeper. Not forced. Invited. Behind the altar was a passage. Stone steps led underground. The corridor was lined with doors, each bearing a number. Inside. They saw them. Children. Not caged, but dressed identically, eyes vacant, movements rehearsed. As if they had been taught to be silent in spirit, not just voice. Callan's breath caught. How many? Ressa whispered. 37. Marina checked the last door. 40. Alira turned to the robed man. What is this? He smiled. A place of clarity. No memories. No burdens. We erase them to make them whole. She stepped forward. Who gave you that right? The mothers, the fathers. They send them. They ask. You wish to take away what hurts them. Alira's voice was steel. You erased more than pain. You erased them. He didn't argue. That night, they stayed near the ridge. Ressa sat by the fire, transcribing what she had seen. Marina cleaned her pistol in silence. Callan stared into the dark. Alira didn't sleep. At dawn, she rode alone back to the church, and rang the bell. It echoed like thunder through the hollow. The man emerged. Alone. I see you haven't fled, he said. I don't flee, Alira replied. I deliver choices. He tilted his head. Go on. You release them, publicly. You send word to every family. You dismantle this place, brick by brick. And you stand before a court to explain what you've done. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, and if I refuse? Alira turned her back. Then I come back. And it won't be to talk. 3 days passed. Then came a wagon, driven by a boy in robes. In the back 6 children, blank-eyed but alive. A note pinned to the boy's chest. one step at a time, then another wagon. Then another. Within 10 days, all 40 children had been released, the church emptied, and when Alira returned, it was gone. Burned. Not by her hand, by the man's. The spire had fallen, but in the ashes. She found something strange, a small book, not scripture, diary, from one of the children. The last line, I don't remember my name, but I remember her voice. She said my story wasn't over. Back in New Haven, Callan placed a new name in the ledger. Church of Fallow, dismantled, and beneath it, not all prisons have bars. Somewhere the face of faith. Ressa closed the book. Alira stood. She looked to the wall, where a map now hung, marked with pins, each one a place where silence had been broken. One remained unpinned, a place no one had dared write about. She turned to Callan. Do we still have contacts in Warden's Gulch? He froze. Marina looked up. That's suicide. Ressa said nothing. Alira walked to the door. Then I'll go alone. Callan followed. You won't. Marina loaded her revolver. You'd lose your aim without me. Ressa tucked the ledger under her arm. Someone has to record the impossible. They stepped into the wind, toward Warden's Gulch, where the silence wasn't hidden. It was worshipped. The Warden's Gulch was gone. Smoke curled from its shattered beams. The canyon floor lay quiet beneath drifting ash, and the children, dozens of them, had walked out alive. But the silence hadn't died there. It had only fled. 2 nights after the collapse, a letter arrived. It had no wax seal, no signature. Just 5 words. She kept the girls quiet, and one location, Drymarsh Haven. The map showed nothing there. Just a dotted outline in the wetlands east of Hykett Valley. A forgotten shape in the reeds. Alira Quint stared at it anyway. Eyes narrowed. This came through neutral post, Marina said. Ressa confirmed the handwriting matches a child's. The charcoal marks are smudged but intentional. Like they were taught to write without making noise. Callan traced the route on a separate chart. If this is real, it's buried. The marsh eats evidence. And people, Marina muttered. Lira folded the map. Then we move fast. They left the next morning. Lira, Callan, Marina, and Ressa. No children this time. No allies. No cavalry. Waiting one town over. Just the ledger. A pack of ink. And 4 people who didn't believe in waiting for evil to be exposed when they could dig it out with their own hands. Drymarsh swallowed them slowly. The air thickened with damp heat. The trees wept constant moisture. The soil was waterlogged, sucking at their boots. But on the 3rd day, they found it, Drymarsh Haven, a cluster of buildings on stilts, half submerged in a gray-green pond that never stopped moving. The homes were painted pale white and lilac, but weathered like bruises. Wind chimes made of hollow bones dangled from each porch. At the center stood a long house. No windows. Just one door, nailed shut from the inside. On the plank above it, words carved in neat cursive. Speak only to the godless. Marina frowned. Not supposed to be a threat or a creed. Callan's hand moved toward his revolver. Feels like both. Alira didn't respond. She walked forward and knocked. 3 sharp raps. Then silence. Then, I see you, traveler. The voice came not from inside the house, but behind them. A woman stood in the water. Gray dress, soaked to the waist. Hair long, matted with moss. Eyes like pale jade, ringed in sleepless shadow. My name is Alyss, she said. You've come where you shouldn't. We came for the girls, Alira said. Alyss blinked slowly. They aren't girls anymore. They are wives of the still. Ressa stepped forward. That's not a name. That's a sentence. You see prisons, I see peace. You see obedience, Alira said. Alyss moved forward, out of the marsh. She carried a wooden staff carved with spirals, tipped with a silver bell. No one is held here. They stay because they've been shown stillness. The world screams. We teach them how to hum beneath it. Callan's voice was low. How many did you silence to keep your quiet? Ulyss turned, and the long house door creaked open, inside. Girls, dozens, standing in rows. Silent. Their mouths had not been stitched, or gagged. They simply would not speak. They won't answer you, Ulyss said. Not unless you sing the stillness. Alira stepped forward. Or unless they hear something louder. She pulled the ledger from her coat. Held it high. And read. Not poetry. Not law. Just names. Names of the freed. Of Luna from Cutter's Run. Of Brea from Wellspring. Of the boy who had whispered, Mama, in the Warden's Gulch. Of every child who had once chosen silence because it was safer. And when she finished, one girl stepped forward. Her name was Jaren. She was 11, and she said, Mine was taken. I want it back. Ulyss froze. Another voice. I remember my brother's voice. Another. My mother sang when I was small. Ulyss began to shake. You don't know what you're doing, she hissed. Ressa stepped beside Alira. I think they do. The unraveling was quiet. No fire. No riot. Just stillness undone by recognition. The girls walked out one by one, some holding hands, some whispering names they had not said in years. Jaren carried the ledger. She added a line. We remembered, even when they told us to forget. Ulyss stood alone on the porch. She did not follow. She vanished. And when Alira returned the next morning, the long house was gone, sunk beneath the marsh. All that remained was the plank. Speak only to the godless. But someone had carved beneath it. We did. Back at the ridge, Ressa unfolded another letter. A new name, a new place. Callan looked up at Alira. Morena didn't speak, just cleaned her rifle. Alira folded the map. And walked toward the wind, because stillness was never the answer, and silence only lasted until the ledger spoke again. Part 15. The silence worship when the ridge opened to Warden's Gulch. It was not a town but a wall of stone and iron. Alira Quince rode up to the rim and let Bristle halt of her own accord, the mare's ears flicking at the distant echo of metal creaking. Below, the gulch floor lay hidden in deep shadow, bisected by catwalks of rusted steel and punctuated by cages suspended like grim ornaments. Each cage held a child slumped, still and silent. Their eyes tracked nothing but the empty air between the bars. Callan Trask reined in beside her, his breath visible in the chill air. They call this the sanctuary? Alira's jaw tightened. They worship silence here. Morena Dahl and Ressa Winfrey dismounted behind them. Morena's rifle was slung at ease. Ressa clutched the ledger to her chest as if it were a lifeline. Alira pointed to the largest structure, a stone amphitheater cut into the canyon wall, where a hooded figure stood at a carved podium. His back was to them, but his stature was unmistakable tall. Still, and unmoving. Without a word. The group crossed the final stretch of cracked concrete and climbed the nearest staircase. At the top, the figure turned. He wore a mask of polished silver that reflected the gulch's gloom back at itself. His hands were bare, and in one, he held a small silver bell. His voice, when he spoke, was a whisper carried by the canyon's acoustics. Welcome, children of sound. Alira stepped forward. You're the warden, he nodded once. I am the keeper of stillness. I offer release. By stealing their voices? Callan asked. He raised the bell. They begged for peace. I gave it to them. A child in a nearby cage shifted. Alira recognized the movement as one of hope, not fear. Ressa raised the ledger, voice trembling. Names aren't just words. They're life. The warden's mask glinted. Then speak. Unbind them. Alira glanced at her friends, Morena's steady gaze, Callan's tense shoulders, Ressa's fingers tracing the book's spine. She stepped closer to the cages. You have 48 children here. He nodded, all who could not bear to remember. Alira took a breath. Then I'll speak their names, she began. Jesse Monroe, A boy with hair the color of summer wheat raised his head. Selena Wu. A girl with braided hair blinked as if waking. Lise Hernandez. She paused to let the syllables settle. Priya Patel. Another child pressed their hand against the bars. One by one, she named them, each syllable a spark in the darkness. Each name a key unlocking memory. Behind her, the warden's bell trembled in his grip. When she spoke the final name, Mara Ellsworth, there was a crack like thunder. The silver mask fractured into shards, clattering down the stone steps. The bell fell silent. The cages creaked open. Children stumbled free, blinking in the light, pressing fingers to their throats as if feeling sound for the first time. The warden sank to his knees, hands raised in surrender. He wept flourished tears that caught the light like broken glass. Alira holstered her blade. Callan crossed the amphitheater. Sanctuary doesn't require a jail, he said. He helped the warden to his feet. Ressa opened the ledger and stepped before the freed children. Write what you felt. No one will judge you here. Mirena lowered her rifle but stayed alert. Holt's riders are coming. We need to move. The children formed a loose circle around Alira, their voices low at first, then rising in unison. Laughter, whispers, even a single gasp of jealousy as one friend outspoke another. Alira watched them, heart full. The silence that once defined. Warden's Gulch was broken forged into song. She turned to the warden. You're coming with us. What of the Gulch? He asked, shoulders heavy. It will heal, Alira said. Above, the first hoofbeats of Holt's reinforcements thundered down the ridge. As the riders appeared, Alira raised a hand to silence. The noise not in pause, but in promise. Silence is no longer your tool, she called out. It's your lesson. The warden nodded, and together they walked toward the rising sound of plainclothes deputies, the freed children trailing behind like a living echo. And Alira Quince, keeper of echoes, led them into daylight, carrying the promise of voices never again denied. Next, the Valley of Lost Echoes awaits, where names linger between the winds. End of Part 15. The horizon bled amber as Alira Quince and her companions crested the ridge that overlooked the Valley of Lost Echoes. The winds below whipped reeds and tall grasses into a frenzied dance, stirring the remnants of old whispers that drifted on the air like half-forgotten lullabies. At the valley's heart lay an abandoned encampment, a labyrinth of sun-bleached tents splayed around a central stone monolith engraved with runes that glowed faintly in the dying light. Callan Trask dismounted first, his boots landing softly on the dew-slick grass. He turned to Alira, voice low and urgent. This is where they said she took them. It's been years. I thought the trail would have gone cold. Alira's eyes were cold fire. The ledger never lies. Some curses cling to the earth. We find the monolith. We break the first chain. Marina Dahl stepped forward, her rifle slung casually over her shoulder. I scouted the perimeter. No sign of recent tracks. But I saw symbols ashes in a circle, like a broken seal. Ressa unfurled the latest letter, one line in a ragged child's hand. The warden taught them to listen in silence. She taught them to answer in fire. Noah Winfrey read it aloud, her voice trembling. Fire. Alira folded the parchment. Then we'll give them the spark. They approached the monolith at dusk. The rune's vertical bands of intertwined glyphs shifted, as if alive. Alira reached out, fingertips grazing the surface. The stone thrummed beneath her touch, responding to her presence. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shuddered. A tremor rippled outward, and the monolith cracked, a jagged seam forming. Down its center, from the fissure poured a column of ash and ember, encircling the stone in a ring of flickering light. Callan shouted over the roar. Run! They scattered, but Alira stood her ground. The runes flared white-hot, etching themselves into her mind. A voice, ancient and broken, echoed through the valley. You who break the silence, speak now or perish in the flame. Illyra drew her blade. We speak. The flame hissed, forming shapes children's faces, twisted in agony, mouths open, but soundless. The spectral figures drifted toward the circle. Marina raised her rifle, hand steady. They're not alive. No, Illyra said. They're the echoes. She stepped into the ring. Each rune's glow pulsed with recognition. The echoes clustered, the air alive with their flickering forms. Illyra closed her eyes and spoke their names. Marisol Rivera, Jae-Hun Kim, Anya Petrov, Desmond Clark, Rivka Rosenthal. One by one, the echoes halted. Their faces softened. Where once they gaped in silent scream, now they held new expressions: hope, relief, longing. With each name, the flame receded, until at last, Illyra spoke the final name, Althea O'Halloran. The monolith shattered, falling into dust. The embers died away. The echoes melted into nothing. In the silence that followed, the valley felt empty and yet alive. Illyra stumbled back, breath ragged. Callan caught her. You did it. She shook her head. They did it. I just spoke. Mirena scanned the horizon. No more tremors. Ressa stepped forward, placing her hand on the ledger. At the Valley of Lost Echoes freed. Illyra nodded. We ride at dawn. There's one place left, Callan asked. Where? Illyra gazed west toward the endless plains, where the first silence began. And together, they turned toward the rising moon, ready for the final reckoning. The next name was scratched onto the paper in blood, not ink. Just 5 letters: Callan Grieve. No coordinates, no town marker. Just a name that hung like smoke in the silence. Ressa studied it beneath the firelight. Not a place, a person? Illyra nodded. Or both. Callan leaned over the flames, hands out. My grandfather spoke about Grieve. Said it was a mine, then a town, then a memory. Nobody ever came back from it. Not with their voice. Marina's mouth tightened. Then that's where we go. Grieve was hidden in the throat of the earth. A ravine with sheer walls, slick with mineral rot and moss. Rusted rails jutted from the cliffs like broken ribs, remnants of an old cable line. At the bottom a chasm, and beyond it, darkness so dense. It bent sound. Illyra stood at the edge. The wind howled, but only outside the mouth of the mine. Inside, not even echoes dared. We go together, she said. Callan lit the lantern. They descended. The tunnel swallowed them. Timber supports groaned with age. Air grew thick, not just with dust, but with memory. Messages scratched into the rock. By broken fingernails. She sang until they stopped. They made me forget my face. No more sound. The deeper they walked, the tighter the air became. As if grief had weight. As if silence had shaped. And then they heard it. A hum, low, steady, not mechanical. Not human. Alive. They rounded a bend and found a chamber. At its center, a black altar, carved from coal, polished to a mirror's shine. Above it, a figure sat on a stone throne, head bowed, face covered in soot. Illyra stepped forward. Grieve. The figure stirred. You speak my name. Do you know what it means? No. It's the sound a mother makes when the last lullaby fails. The figure lifted its head. Eyes hollow, mouth sealed with wax. Yet the voice came clear inside there. Mines. I silenced the town. They begged for it. Too much pain. Too much memory. So I sealed their voices, gave them peace. Illyra's voice sharpened. You stole their breath. They gave it willingly. And when one refused, I kept her voice. In here. Grieve tapped the altar. Illyra stepped closer. Who was she? Grieve's. Head tilted. She came before the fire, before the mine fell. She remembered every child who died in the shaft collapse. She would not forget, so she sang. And her song kept the dead awake. Callan's hand gripped the lantern tighter. You silenced her to bury the guilt. I silenced her so the rest could sleep. Marina raised her rifle. Where is her? Voice now, Grieve smiled. Touch the altar, if you dare. Alira placed her palm on the coal. The world vanished. She stood in the mine, but it was burning. Smoke poured from the walls. Screams echoed. Children clawed at collapsed beams. And in the center a woman, her throat torn raw, still singing. Alira reached for her, but the fire surged out, and the woman turned. You are not my memory, she said. You are the ledger. Alira fell to her knees. Yes, the woman smiled. Then take it. Take my voice. Carry it where I never could. She opened her mouth, and the fire poured out. Alira screamed. Then darkness. She awoke on the cavern floor. Grieve was gone. The altar was cracked. And in her hands, a shard of coal. Still warm, Callan knelt beside her. You were gone an hour. Ressa handed her the ledger. Write it. Alira whispered. Ressa inscribed the final name from Grieve. Soraya King, whose voice raised the dead, and beneath it, Grieve, collapsed, but not forgotten. Marina looked toward the tunnel. So where now? Alira stood. Held the shard to her chest and said, We build something louder. The next morning, they returned to New Haven. To the hill where the first child had found Alira. They built a tower. Wood and stone, wide at the base. Ressa called the children. They came dozens, then hundreds. From Wellspring, from Warden's Gulch, from Drymarsh. From places no longer marked on any map. And they painted their names, their songs, their colors. At the top of the tower, Alira placed the coal shard. She rang the bell they forged from the melted chains of Cutter's Run. The sound echoed. Clear. Loud, unmistakably alive. Callan turned to her. What will we call it? Alira smiled. The answer. That night, the wind carried something different. Not silence, not fear. But stories. And they did not end. Because someone had written them down. Because someone had spoken. Because someone, somewhere, was still listening. Part 18. The original echo. The wind carried the first note before they saw the towers. Alira Quince halted on the ridge overlooking Echo's Ridge, the place where her own story began. 2 towers rose from the plateau, lean spires of steel and glass. At their apex, speakers glinted in the sun, filaments humming with power. Below, the valley stretched as far as the eye could see. No trees, no rivers. Just grasslands rocked by wind and the faintest hum of frequencies. It was the emptiest silence she had ever heard. Callan Trask dismounted, his gaze distant. This is where it started? Alira nodded. Where I lost my voice. Marina Dahl scanned the horizon. And where we end. Ressa unfolded a final letter, brittle with age. They built the towers to drown her cry. No name. No signature. Lira folded it. We finish this tonight. They approached under the cover of dusk. The land sloped gently to the base of the towers. Each tower was ringed by a security fence, sensors blinking red. Clearly, the speakers were broadcasting. Continuous tone, audible even here, low and rumbling like distant thunder. Callan tapped his earpiece. Security's thick. Sensors, cameras, patrol bots. They know we're coming. Alira's lips curved. Then we moved silently. They split into pairs. Marina and Callan circled east, disabling sensors with precision shots. Alira and Ressa advanced west, scaling the fence with grappling hooks. At the base of the western tower, they found the control module locked in a reinforced steel box. Ressa retrieved tools from her pack, her hands steady despite the tension. Alira watched the horizon, every muscle coiled. A patrol bot hovered overhead. Ressa froze. Alira whispered, Blind spot. Ressa hefted the box. They dashed to the tower's shadow. Moments later, both modules were open. Wires spilled out like veins. Alira knelt, cutting the power cable to the western speaker. The hum ceased sharp and sudden like a wound closing. Across the valley, the eastern tower's tone faltered too, as if both systems were linked. The bot above whirred, alarms blaring. Marina's voice crackled. You did it. Now get up here. Illyra helped Ressa climb the tower. Each rung was smooth steel, polished by weather. They reached the speaker platform. The night sky was a canopy of stars. Illyra surveyed the valley. No wind. No hum. Just silence. She placed a hand on the speaker's grill. Now we speak. Ressa plugged in a small transmitter. You sure? Illyra nodded. For all those who never had a chance to say their name. Ressa keyed the mic. Lyra spoke into the night. This is the voice of Echoes Ridge. My name is Illyra Quince. I stand on the shoulders of every child forced into silence. I carry their stories so they will never fade. From Warden's Gulch to Dry Marsh Haven, from Grieve to the Valley of Lost Echoes, hear their names. Repeat them. Remember them. Her voice crackled through the speaker, amplified across the plains. The sound traveled on the wind, across ridges and valleys, into towns big and small. A moment passed. Then from every direction, faint voices joined her. Marisol Rivera, Jae-Hun Kim, Anya Petrov. The voices swelled into a chorus. Not clean, not perfect, but alive. Illyra's eyes glistened. They live. Ressa recorded it all. Back on the ground, Callan and Marina watched the speakers sparkle. Callan placed a hand on Illyra's shoulder. You did it. Illyra nodded. We did it. Marina smiled. They're listening. The chorus faded into the night, but its echo lingered, vibrating through the land like a heartbeat. That night, around a bonfire at the edge of Echoes Ridge, they read the final ledger entries. Echoes Ridge voice restored. The answer tower built. The wind whispered through the grasses, carrying the memory of many names. Illyra gazed at the flickering flames. She thought of the widow's door, of voices once denied, and she knew the ledger was complete. I said we end here, she whispered. But no one left. They sat in the glow. Waiting. For the wind to speak again. At dawn, the towers began to dismantle themselves. Sensors shut down. Machinery powered off. And in their place, people arrived. Engineers, storytellers, children. They harvested the metal to build new homes. They used the glass to form windows open to the sky, and they scattered the speaker's components across the land, each gifted to communities who needed to amplify their own voices. Illyra Quince stood among them, a pen in her hand, a new ledger open on her lap. She wrote, Echoes Ridge beginning. And for the first time, she placed her own name alone, Illyra Quince, keeper of the echo. Behind her, the plains stretched endless, not silent, never silent again. Part 19. The legacy carved in stone. Dawn rose over the plains like an old promise rekindled. The silhouette of the newly christened Tower of Echoes stood tall against the horizon, its wooden planks glowing in soft rose light around its base. What had once been the final survivors of Grieve, Cutter's Run, Warden's Gulch, Dry Marsh Haven, Marley's End, and Echoes Ridge now gathered with families spread behind them. The wind carried the faint hum of their voices, merging into a living tapestry of sound that blended laughter, whispered names, and the faint cracking of old scars transforming into new beginnings. Illyra Quince sat cross-legged on the tower's lowest platform, her ledger open in her lap. Beside her, Ressa Winfrey carefully inscribed new entries with ink made from crushed berries and steel dust, and homage to the places where silence had been broken. The Church of Fallow, the Valley of Lost Echoes, and more. Callan Trask leaned against a support beam, arms crossed, watching the crowd. Marina Dahl patrolled the perimeter, eyes sharp for any disruption. Families exchanged stories about how they had healed. A mother who once could not sing her daughter a lullaby for fear. It would summon nightmares, now humming softly as she rocked her child in her arms. A boy who had once been too afraid to speak to his grandmother, now recounting his adventures with hushed excitement. Even the children who had spent months in the dark mines or derelict chapels found comfort in the simple. joy of being heard. But amidst the celebration, Alira's mind drifted westward. Beyond the horizon lay the cradle of her own story, a forgotten canyon where a shadow had once taught her to be silent. Every name in the ledger was a victory, but her heart whispered that the final chapter one long buried beneath shifting sands remained unwritten. A gust of wind swept across the plains, stirring a swirl of dust and petals from the flowering shrubs planted around the tower. Alira closed her ledger and rose gracefully. She walked down the steps, the wood creaking underfoot, and joined the throng below. Ressa slipped beside her, ink-stained fingers brushing Alira's arm. Ressa's voice was soft. Where to next? Alira gazed at the people, their faces shining. With hope, to the canyon where it all began, she said. To the place no letter ever mentioned, but whose silence taught me everything. Callan stepped forward, his eyes bright with determination. We ride at first light, Marina nodded. Ready as ever. The crowd parted respectfully as the core team passed. Families pressed small gifts into Ressa's handscarves to ward off cold nights, pressed flowers to press into the pages of the ledger, and handcrafted wind chimes of bone and shell to adorn the canyon's mouth. The next morning, they set out across the plains, guided by the sun and the hidden knowledge of those who'd walked the land before them. The journey was long, the heat oppressive, but each turn of the saddle and every mile covered resonated with the echoes of voices now freed. On the fifth day, they arrived at the canyon's rim. The cliffs rose like sentinels. At the lip was a single engraved marker barely legible under layers of moss and lichen. To whom silence was home. Alira dismounted. She approached the stone, running her hand over the inscription. The words carved by an unknown hand trembled with history. Drawing her blade, she traced the letters. Underneath, fresh chisel marks glowed in the morning light. Alira Quince, speaker of Shadow Solara's lips curved in the faintest smile. She turned to Ressa, who lifted the ledger. Alira took it and wrote the final entry. The canyon of silent beginnings, reclaimed. Above them, vultures circled. Below, in the stillness, a single voice rose in a whisper. Heliel echoing off the cliff. Walls. Then another. I remember a chorus of voices followed. The canyon no longer held its breath. It sang. And Alira Quince, keeper of echoes, stood at its mouth, pen raised, ready to record. The wind over the plains did not simply blow that morning. It carried the weight of 20 long journeys, 20 reckonings, and 20 victories, some small, some immense. Standing atop the Tower of Echoes, Alira Quince gazed over the sea of faces below. Children pressed wind chimes against their ears. Elders traced scars on their arms where silence once lived. And families pointed toward distant horizons where new lives awaited. In her hands, the final ledger lay heavy, its pages brimming with names, stories, and the promise that no voice would ever fade into oblivion again. Below, Callan Trask approached, his stride steady, though the crease between his brows bespoke exhaustion. Marina Dahl followed, her silhouette sharp against the morning light, and Ressa Winfrey carried a satchel brimming with pens, inkwells, and the first copies of a new volume, The Annals of Echo. Over the past weeks, those volumes had been printed in New Haven, Wellspring, and every liberated settlement. They contained not only names, but poems, drawings, and songs contributed by survivors, an anthology of resilience. The crowd hushed as Alira began to speak. Her voice, once quiet, now carried across the plains like a clarion call. We began this journey in the dust of a saloon where a widow's single word, "Me too," ignited a flame. We walked through Blackwood's Gang, the Warden's Gulch, the Church of Fallow, and countless shadows of silence. We brought names to the voiceless, freed those locked in stillness, and shone light into every dark corner we could find. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle on the listeners. Today, we stand not at an end, but at a beginning. For every story we have recorded, there are countless more waiting to be told. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A boy, With a broken leg, once silent, now stood supported by two friends. He raised a small lantern aloft. All at once, dozens of lanterns flickered into life. Each flame represented a voice reclaimed. Then in the distance, a low hum began. Not from towers or machines, but from thousands of throats finding harmony. Mothers singing lullabies in hallowed whispers. Farmers chanting morning blessings. Children reciting names in rhythmic cadence. The plains themselves thrummed with life, an orchestration of memory and hope that no silence could ever contain. Ira felt tears sting her eyes. She looked down at the ledger, its pages swollen with ink and emotion. She turned to the blank page at the very end. "Here," she said softly, kneeling. She dipped her pen into the inkwell crafted from the first well water of New Haven. She wrote, "Illyra Quince, keeper of echoes, singer of shadows, friend to the voiceless." Below that, she added, "And all those who listened." As she closed the ledger, the crowd erupted into song. The melody rose, notes carrying on the wind, weaving through the grasses, flowing over distant hills, binding once lost souls in a tapestry of sound. Callan stepped forward, taking Illyra's hand. "What now?" he asked. Ira turned to face. "The sunrise. Now we carry this truth beyond the plains. We teach it to every settlement, every homestead. We build schools, halls of memory, and we train keepers, men and women, who will stand guard over stories as fiercely as any guard holds a weapon. Silence will never flourish again." Marina raised her rifle, now repurposed as a ceremonial staff carved with engravings of every place they had freed. "Then let's begin." Ressa lifted the first volume high. "To the annals of Echo, may they outlast us all." And together, they led the crowd in the declaration of sound. "We pledge our voices against the void. We lend our words to the lost. We sing their names so the winds may carry them to the stars. And we vow, no silence ever again." The plains answered with a roar of sound, laughter, singing, the crackle of 1,000 conversations spilling into the dawn. Ira watched them, heart full. 20 parts, 20 trials, and the ledger complete, yet every new page destined to be filled. She stepped down from the tower and walked among the people, greeting each child by name. At the edge of the festivities, she paused and looked west to the horizon. Somewhere beyond lay the road's next chapter, unwritten, yet promised. She raised her hand in silent blessing. The wind carried it onward, a ripple of light, and as the sun climbed higher, Illyra turned back to her family of voices. She raised her voice once more. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.